Math, chapter 1.3, we're going to start with the vocabulary. There's only one new vocabulary word, and it is absolute value. This is my all-time favorite thing to teach because it's super easy. Absolute value is always positive. That is the one thing you need to remember throughout the entire school year. Absolute value is always positive. Absolute value is the distance a number is from 0 on a number line. I know that sounds kind of confusing. However, it's about to be very, very simple. This is the most important thing to remember all school year long is absolute value is always positive. So, for example, these two little brackets, this is the symbol for absolute value. When you see this on a test, they're asking absolute value, what is it? So remember, these two brackets, they're asking what is the absolute value of whatever number is inside. And the easiest way to do this is the absolute value of -2. So we're looking for the distance a number is from 0. So we have 0. How many times do we have to skip to get to -2? 1, 2. How many times? It was 2 times. So the absolute value is 2. It's not asking for the opposite, it's just asking for the absolute value. Now I have a +2 down here. So we're going to do the same thing we just did to the -2, but we're going to skip from 0 to +2. How many times was that? 1, 2. So the absolute value of +2 is +2. The absolute value of -2 is +2. The absolute value of 3 would equal 3. It's the same number that's in here, but positive, no matter what. If it's absolute value of -176, your answer is going to be a +176. Absolute value is super, super easy. It is the number that's inside your absolute value brackets with a positive sign, even if it's already positive. Okay? That's all absolute value is. It's super simple. We're going to do a few examples. We're going to clear up the difference between opposites and absolute value in our examples as well. So this is super, super easy. This is going to be a breeze. Your homework is going to be so easy for you. Okay, so we're doing math 1.3 examples now. So we're talking about absolute value. And remember, these brackets around a number are telling you that you need to find the absolute value. So remember, the absolute value is the distance that number is from 0 or just that number, but it's always positive. So you always need to remember the absolute value is always positive. And if we were in school learning, we would scream that 1,000 times during this math lesson. We turn it into a game, we scream it at each other because it's so important to remember absolute value is always positive. So, -7. You can do this on a number line. I have -7, -6, -5, -4, 3, -2, -1, and 0. And you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The absolute value of -7 is 7. Or you can just look at the number without a sign in front of it, and that's your answer. So for a +3, don't get confused. You can do your number line. 0, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It's the same number. The absolute value of a +3 is a +3. That's because absolute value is always positive. Now I have a +7. This should be easy. It's just 7. Because +7 is 7 units away from 0 on a number line. It's the same number, it's just positive, no matter what. If it's already positive, it stays positive. -90, the absolute value of -90. You're going to look at your digit. We've got 90. You're going to look at your sign is negative, so we already know absolute value is always positive. So if you want to put a little positive sign next to all of them, you can. If you want to leave them without a sign, you can. Super not difficult, guys. Don't get confused, but something to keep in mind. Number 1, you kind of have to think on your homework. And we're going to go through number 1 just because it's a little more confusing. If a number is blank, it is less than its absolute value. So if absolute value is always positive, if a number is negative, it's going to be less than its absolute value. So we're going to write that together. If I'm going to use the number symbol, number is negative, it will be less than its absolute value. And let's do an example so you kind of understand it a little bit better. So if I have a negative 11, its absolute value is going to be what? I'll give you a second to think about it. Look at the number, cover up the sign, whatever the number is, you write the number, and it's positive. So, is the actual value, not the absolute value, just the value of negative 11, is negative 11 greater than or less than positive 11? It's going to be less than. Would you rather owe me $11 or have me give you $11? That's greater, okay? So, if a number is negative, it will be less than its absolute value. That's just because absolute value is always positive. Now, the other thing we always get confused on every single year in 6th grade is the difference between absolute value and opposite numbers. Opposites are just changing the sign. Opposite numbers actually change the sign, no matter what. You change it. If it's positive, you change it to a negative. If it's a negative, you change it to a positive. But absolute value is always positive. And I know on your test, on the last day of the week, you're going to get confused. Everyone does every year. And usually I walk around the classroom and I stare at you and I nudge you and I'm like, is that opposite or absolute value? What is absolute value always? And then everybody's like, I forgot. So if I'm asking for the opposite of negative 7, that's going to be a positive 7 if I'm looking for the opposite. Okay? So just like if I'm looking for the opposite of positive 7, it equals negative 7. Okay? But if I'm looking for the absolute value of negative 7, it's going to be always positive. But the only difference here is if I'm looking for the absolute value of a positive 7, the number stays the same. You're not changing the sign to a negative if you're looking for absolute value. Absolute value is always positive. If you ever get a negative answer in one of these, when you see these brackets, you're wrong. It's always positive, okay? So that's the only big thing to know for chapter 1 and for your test is don't get confused. And remember, oops, I just erased that. Absolute value, or AV, absolute value, is shown by this symbol. The number on the inside of the brackets. Negative 7, you're looking for the absolute value of negative 7. It could be 13, absolute value of 13. These brackets tell you you're looking for absolute value. So the big thing to remember is absolute value is always positive. If there's one thing you remember all of 6th grade and you can remember nothing else, absolute value is always positive because it comes up on every single test. It comes up on every single standardized test. It will be on the IAR Park test. This is the most important thing to know. This will follow you in math for the rest of your school career. You're always going to need to know what is absolute value. It goes on in 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. This is something super, super important. Absolute value is always positive. All right, so that's math 1.3 examples. Good luck on your homework.